The third session of paper presentation is chaired by Dr. Sangeeta Singh. She is working as an associate professor, head of the Department of English at Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose Memorial PG Government College, Hamirpur, Himachal Pradesh. We are glad to have you here as a chairperson of this session.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. Uh, I welcome you all to the third technical session of the International Conference on American Literature. So we have, without much ado, we would straight away, we already delayed for the session. So we have 5 speakers, presenters, and as the organizers have given me certain guidelines, I would like to share the guidelines with the speakers. Each presenter would be given only 10 minutes to make his or her presentation. And I would request the paper presenters to kindly adhere to the time limit allocated to them. Maybe we can have the discussions at the end of each paper, or we can spare last 10 minutes for the question answer sessions. And the audience can also post their queries and observation in the chat box, and we can collate those questions and observations, and we can discuss on that. Further, I would request all the people who have joined here to please keep their mics on a mute mode till the presentations are going on, so that there is minimum of disturbance. So we have 5 speakers. The first speaker that we have is Dr. N.R. Gopal. I hope he's here.
Yeah, ma'am. Very much.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Dr. N.R. Gopal, he's an associate professor at the Department of English. He's also the director, Center for Tribal Literature of America from the Central University of Himachal Pradesh, Dharamshala. And his paper is about exploring the significance of cultural reintegration in N. Scott Momaday's House Made of Dawn. So I hand over the platform to Sir. Sir is a quite senior teacher from Himachal. So we are very privileged to have him here in this technical session. So I hand over the platform to you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. So kind of you. I was going through the participants in different technical sessions, and I was wondering as to see that hardly any paper on Native American literature, except for me. So I hope that, and I wish that in times to come, there will be more studies on Native American literature, as they are the real stakeholders of the Americas. As you have already given the title of my presentation, today's presentation, but once again, I just would like to repeat the same, so that the audience are able to know what I'm going to talk about today. Basically, I'm going to give a voice to Native Americans. And for that, I have chosen one author and his one text. Exploring the significance of cultural reintegration in Navarre Scott Momaday's House Made of Dawn. Basically, Native American literature is a collection of oral and written literary works which explains the antiquity, philosophy, art, and music of the native population of the Americas. Over centuries, these Native Americans have tried to articulate their experiences as individuals, as part of a community and nation at large. Text-based Native American literature multiplied in the 19th century. Literature, eventually became a means to mend their socio-political fix. While some authors, through their writings, bring out the significance of Native American traditions in contemporary society, at the other hand, there are other writers, they try to write about the strife of Native American women. Intense and heartfelt historical narratives of resistance cannot be missed here. Their recent works do not fail to articulate their prevailing social issues as they exist in a vaster American society. One finds universal human themes echoing and overlapping the concerns of their community and tribes in Native American literature. As I said that for this presentation, I have taken up one author and one of his novels. N. Scott Momaday is a great Native American novelist, reflecting his personal experiences and cultural ethos. Momaday's 1968 novel, A House Made of Dawn, is perhaps regarded as a crucial milestone in the history of Native American literature, for which he got Pulitzer Prize in 1969. And it is primarily based on Momaday's first-hand knowledge of Pueblo life, is the tribe I'm talking to you about, that he also belonged. He expresses his individual experiences creatively in the novel. House Made of Dawn is basically inspired by Native American traditions, locations, and natural events. There is a noticeable autobiographical elements in this particular novel. The description of Hamij and Navajo cultures is based on writers' personal experiences. It is also it also refers to the landscape of the Southwest and the way of life of the tribal people in America. The novel basically is divided into four parts and is a complex connections of flashbacks. We get elements of alienation, violence, alcoholism, and disintegration as the important themes of the novels. Now, to talk about the text in hand, after serving in World War II, the novel's protagonist, Abel, returns to his reservation in New Mexico. The war has left Abel psychologically damaged, and he arrives home too drunk to recognize his grandfather, Francisco. Abel was instilled with indigenous traditions and values by Francisco, but the war and other events severed Abel's ties to the land and its people. At the end of the novel, after a long period of conflict, Abel returns to the reservation in New Mexico to look after his dying grandfather. His grandfather tells him stories from his youth and emphasizes the value of staying connected to his people's traditions. Abel prepares his grandfather for burial and smears his own body with ashes. As the sun rises, Abel begins to run and sing. This event represents Abel's return to his people and the world. The novel depicts a crisis of identity for the Indians. Abel, the central figure of the novel, symbolizes this crisis. He re-establishes his bond with his tribal culture at the end of the novel. The novel is a strong claim for a search and a realistic description of the forces that impede such a search. As often affirmed, the core theme of House Made of Dawn is the beauty of Native American traditions and their vitality for the next generation. The novel beautifully portrays some important highlights of Pueblo culture, namely the seasonal ceremonies. Significant events in House Made of Dawn are tied to the seasonal ceremonies of Pueblo agricultural year, particularly the life cycle of corn, what we know as maize here. All of the traditional arts and sciences are interwoven in a total cosmology that relates all elements of the universe: human, animal, plant, mineral, into a cohesive whole. Such ceremonies and other activities are undertaken to maintain this integrated, holistic universe and community. For instance, in the novel, one of the Francisco's last memories is of taking his young grandson to watch the point at which the sun will appear at the summer solstice, and also learn other points at which sunrise will mark days for the performance of specific activities. Similarly, witchcraft is important to the plot of House Made of Dawn. Various scholars, they mention how pervasive and strong belief in witches is throughout different Southwest cultures. In the novel, Banele mentions the kinds of catastrophes attributed to witches, like crop failure, death of children, and unexplained changes in weather. Likewise, let me mention about the Navajo chants. House Made of Dawn takes its title from a prayer that forms part of a long, highly elaborate Navajo ritual, the night chant. They are specific for illness of various kinds. In the novel, the night chant has a healing influence over Abel. It is one of the string of ritual activities that aid Abel's regeneration. The others are the funeral rite for his grandfather and his participation in the ceremonial race at the end. The night chant restores Abel's integrity, which was disrupted by an alien culture. This Indian ritual aims at the integration of the individual with the environment. Physical and mental health are restored to him through practice and song. The House Made of Dawn deals with the relocation and migration of the tribe, its cultural crisis, and potential rebirth. They believed in rebirth of human being, human soul. So it portrays the cultural survival of a traditional tribe in the context of an encroaching alien culture. In addition, reviewers interpret Momade's novel as a narrative of challenges faced by Native Americans as they forcibly assimilate into the outside world. This novel, yet again, is a powerful portrayal of the Native American experience chosen to veracity. To conclude, the saga of oppression, the question of identity, and the denial to concede to forceful cultural assimilation mirrors in the native writings. The Native American Renaissance literature since the 1960s chiefly sought to revive traditional culture and values through various genres. Native literature has, throughout time, touched on extensive and diverse issues like affirmation and assertion of rich civilizational heritage, depiction of historical narratives, political subjugation, life on reservations paralleled to urban survival, and contemporary societal concerns. Native writers, notwithstanding their gender, have tirelessly strived and succeeded in making their presence felt on the broader canvas. Thank you very much. I welcome if there are some questions or observations.
Yes, I would invite the audience here. If they have any queries or observations, they are free to unmute and speak up. Anybody from the audience who would like to ask Sir regarding the presentation that he has made on the Native American writer?
Although I tried to put it in the simplest words as possible to me. Yeah.
Anybody? Okay. So since nobody is willing to ask anything, I would just like to congratulate Sir. So it was a very insightful presentation that you made about the Native American writer, uh, N. Scott Momaday's House Made of Dawn. In fact, when I was going through your presentation, I was tempted to read a little bit more about this author. And your observation is very true that very few paper presenters are actually dealing with the Native American literature, who are the real stakeholders of America for that matter. And it would be an interesting read to know about their culture and their location, their traditions, their antiquity, and the way they try to preserve their culture along with the onslaught of modernization. And also another observation that I would like to highlight here, of which you talked about in the novel of N. Scott, was the integration or the holistic approach that these Native Americans have. Yeah. I found it quite similar to our own Indian Hindu way of looking at things, the Vasudev Kutumbakam and the spiritual chanting and the funeral rites, and how they are, how it regenerates the character, the protagonist, and how he, finds his roots back, and he, instead of getting assimilated with the Western culture or the colonial culture, he comes back to his roots. So that was my observation. I hope you have something to say about it.
Right. Yes. Actually, still research is being done on that particular issue. I remember 2 years back, the university had organized a webinar wherein we tried to rope in a number of Native Americans, those who participated with us. And I remember that our earlier vice chancellor, he said that he coined a phrase calling these people as sons of Asia, uh, thereby calling them as people who long back, maybe 25,000 years ago, in Ice Age, they migrated from Asia to the new world that we know America as. So, of course, when I also go through when their text and their literature, what I come to know about is that many of their rituals, many of their customs, they match some way or the other, as you mentioned that we also find the same tone in our own traditions. So yes, of course, that is there. And still, we are researching on that. Many of the people, there is one professor, Lata Dani at University of Pune, who has worked on this and tried to establish a relationship between these Indians, these native Indians in scattered throughout the Americas, how they have got a connection with India, that is that is Bharat with us. And people are there who are doing a lot of extensive and intensive research on that. Yeah.
Yes, sir. In fact, the Indian knowledge system here is also being revived in the present times. That's what is my observation. And
Right.
I'm sure it's a very fertile ground for research, establishing cross connections with the, you know,
Right. I
the
hope
Native
that
Americans.
yeah, I hope that this through this platform, I may be able to inspire some of the scholars to look into this particular less explored area of research called Native American literature. And in times to come, I hope that there will be many more paper presenters talking about the cause of these native Indians.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I
Now,
thank all the audience here, particularly Dr. Hemraj Bansal from my own department, and many more are from different colleges of Himachal Pradesh. Thank you. Thank you all.
thank you, sir. So, without much ado, we move on to the next presenter. The next presenter is uh, P. Senthil Kumar. He's the PhD scholar from the Department of English, Government Arts and Science College from Kumarapalayam, Namakkal. And I hope he's here. Is P. Senthil Kumar here?
No, ma'am, he is not present in the meeting.
I saw him join and then leave the meeting twice. So I think he's not here. So we move on to the next speaker, the third speaker, Radhika Ingalagai. And she is going to present her paper. Is she here? Sarika? Radhika. Radhika.
No, ma'am, she is also not present in the meeting.
She's also not presenting. Okay. So we do not have two speakers in a row. The fourth speaker would be Gaurav Sen Gupta. I hope he is here to present.
Yes, ma'am, I'm present. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Gaurav Sen Gupta is going to present his paper on lost perception, reading abnormal psychology in Richard Powers, The Echo Maker. So I think he's
Uh,
making a present.
yes, ma'am. Is the screen visible to everyone? Okay, I
Yes,
hope.
Yes, it is
All right.
visible.
Yeah, yeah.
yes,
I
it's
hope it is
visible.
visible as well as audible. So a very good afternoon to everyone. I am Gaurav Sen Gupta from Assam, and the presentation that I'm going to make today is the title that I have uh, made here visible is The Lost Perception, Reading Abnormal Psychology in Richard Powers' The Echo Maker. So this is just a roadmap for every one of us to just have an overview of what the presentation will be all about. So first of all, we are going to have a brief introduction to who Richard Powers is. Thereby, we'll try to locate him in the American context. We will try to highlight certain objectives and methodology of the paper that I have adopted while doing this particular research. We will move on to highlighting some important ideas in the discussion part. And finally, we will be moving on to the conclusion part where I will be trying to highlight the important findings of this paper. If we look in Richard Powers and his contribution in American literature, we see that he has been a prominent writer, and he has also been a professor in English. And he has won various awards of national as well as international repute. He is the 2006 winner of the National Book Award for Fiction. He has also won the 2019 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. And his works basically explores the effect of modern science and technology on humanity. And the text that I have decided to discuss is The Echo Maker, where he explores the idea of psychology and belongingness. And it is very interesting to see that he is kind of making, or rather, paving a way for the medical humanities. And this is something which is gaining prominence in today's world, in the literature, in the scenery of literature today. However, this particular book, which was published in 2006, it makes a fresh attempt to this whole new idea of medical humanities. The objective and methodology that I have adopted for uh, this particular paper is basically we will be trying to understand the notion of perception. We will also try to understand the fact that perception is very elusive as it can undergo drastic changes. We are also going to see how certain external stressors uh, work very efficiently to change perception. And the methodology that I have adopted is the close study of the primary text, The Echo Maker, which was published in 2006. I have also tried to incorporate ideas from psychology as well as phenomenology to deal with the descriptions of this particular text. Let us just try to have an idea and overarching viewpoint of what perception is and what are its characteristics. So perception is basically, it comes from the word perceive, which means to the ability to understand or comprehend the world. Perception is basically done through the five senses within the human being. Richard Powers in The Echo Maker, he problematizes this notion of perception, and according to Powers, he makes a comment that perception is in a constant state of flux. There are certain external environment which we call stressors, which contribute towards this particular flux. This external environment can hit the individual in the form of accidents or in the form of trauma. And this very much shapes the personal experiences of the human being. The Echo Maker, which is a story of the central character Mark, he partially loses his sense of perception, and this is what the entire story is all about. Now we need to understand Mark's character through the lens of phenomenology. And since we are talking about perception, which is very much a subjective notion of a being, therefore I think that the ideas of phenomenology is aptly suitable while making a research on this particular character that we're talking about. So if we look at Marx's presence in the world through the Heideggerian lens, we have to understand that Heidegger very much talks about the notion of the being, which he calls the Dasein. And this being is located in a world. Now, this world is a space which is given to all the beings who work out through their correlation with other Daseins, and therefore they form the perception of the world. Now, this perception, which Heidegger calls D1, is very much working within the particular Dasein. And this D1, it creates ideas and notions about the world as a whole. So if we have to understand the Dasein thoroughly, we also have to keep one thing in mind, that an individual or a Dasein or a being, it cannot exist individually. It works as an interconnected chain, which Heidegger again calls it as the Mitatsing. And there are external stressors that alters the Dasein's perspectives. This affectedness of the Dasein it not only affects one particular individual, but according to the phenomenologists, it affects the entire chain of the dozens that are interrelated. So the entire metaxane chain gets affected. Powers in the novel, he highlights this particular issue of how a dozen's interconnectedness with the other dozens is kind of affecting the entire chain. If we happen to look at the discussion or the plot of the ecomaker, Powers, as I have already mentioned, he tries to bring in aspects from medical humanities, and he talks about certain psychological conditions of the individual, and he brings in a complex case of Cape Grass syndrome. Now, this particular idea or the notion of the Cape Grass syndrome, as it has been highlighted in the DSM-5, which is basically a handbook that is prescribed by the American Psychological Association. Uh, According to the DSM-5, the Cape Grass syndrome is a complex delusional disorder. And in case of Mark, it happens after an accident that he faces, which we see as readers in the opening pages of the novel. Now, this particular accident, it alters his entire perception. He thinks that his sister, Karin, is not a real being. He considers her to be someone who is not a part of this real world. So, though Mark's perception, or through Mark's perception, Powers questions the idea of what is real and what does it mean to exist in this world. It is not only Mark, but also his attendees who suffer, as I have already mentioned and highlighted the notion of the design and its interconnectedness with the other designs in the world. So the entire chain of metaxane in the novel, we see that it kind of gets affected. Mark, towards the end of the novel, his perception loses to such a great extent that he almost considers himself to be a ghost. And this, again, according to the DSM-5, uh, they kind of name it as the Cotard's syndrome. Just coming to the conclusion and findings of this particular paper. So though Richard Powers, he presents an American setting and an American landscape in the novel, but the problem he discusses is kind of universal to mankind. The problem of belongingness and affective psychology is brought in front of the readers. We also understand that perception is something which is not static. It is in a constant state of flux. It undergoes changes based on various events of the world. It can be modified or altered. And sorry, the last but not the least, one's effectiveness affects the lives of other people concerned as well. So with this, I come to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much. I've tried to keep it very brief and simple so that it kind of makes sense to the reader.
Thank you, Gaurav. So I would invite questions from the audience if anybody has any
Am I
observations.
audible?
Yes, you're very much audible, Gaurav. Anybody would like to make an observation or ask any question to Gaurav? You can put it in the chat box. I can read out the question for you. Let me check if there are any. No. So Gaurav, your paper was quite different. As I was just wondering that you could have probably highlighted a little bit about the American backdrop in which this novel is being placed. Gaurav has left the meeting, so he's not there to answer my query, just left the meeting. Anyways, so this is the psychological novel which he has picked up for his presentation. Yes, he's back. Gaurav, I was asking if you could have elaborated a little bit more about the American background as well in your presentation, it would have, been relevant to the theme of the conference.
Yes, ma'am. As I have already mentioned, like Powers in this novel, what he interestingly does is he is not talking about the American individual or the American identity in general. This is what we have heard in the last session. Like because of globalization and the notions of the borders are becoming so less relevant now in the 21st century American literature, the distinct voice of the American notion is kind of missing in this particular novel. And like, although he talks about the American landscape, but he tries to present the problems of the humanity as a whole. It is not just about America, or it is not just about the abnormal psychology of the American individual. This is happening in case of the people of the entire world. And Richard Powers' other novels also, if we see, for example, The Overstory, which has won the Pulitzer Prize 2019, he talks about environment. He talks about certain characters and their connectedness, interrelationship with the environment. So although Powers is an American novelist, but then he is not specifically highlighting the issues and ideas related to the American literary scenario. So this is, I suppose I find it very interesting in one way, like as ma'am has already mentioned in the last session, borders are becoming less important now. And we are kind of moving towards world literature. This is something which is very relevant. The distinct voices are kind of missing.
True.
This is
That
what
is that is true. That is true what you're saying. But since the theme of the conference was American literature, so I was just interested if you could have added a little bit about the American backdrop as well. Of course, the novel that you've chosen and the theme that you've chosen is very much relevant, very much universal in its appeal.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So I have not read this novel, but I'm quite interested in how the perception changes with the incidents of accidents and trauma, and how it leads to such psychological ailments, I would say.
Yes,
it would be quite an interesting read, this novel. Thank you, Gaurav, for your presentation. Thank you so much. So we have another presentation. I believe this is the last presenter, Miss Nekisuno Kame. I hope she's here. Yes, she's here.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Her presentation is the Anglo-Indians being a mixed race in India and overseas. So I invite her to present her paper.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Am I audible now?
Yes, hello? You're audible. Yes, you're very much audible.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. With a limited time, I'll just try to present my paper as fast as possible. Like, I'll be as precise as possible. So my title is like The Anglo-Indians Being a Mixed Race in India and Overseas. The Anglo-Indians are one of the oldest diasporic communities of India, a mixed race born out of liaison between Indian and European descent. The Anglo-Indians as a mixed race community have survived till date, but the decreasing population of the Anglo-Indian community in India has become a concern, especially for the researchers in recent times. The objective of this paper is to understand how the Anglo-Indians as a mixed race community came into being, evolved, and survived till date in India as well as overseas. The paper will also attempt to locate the identity of the Anglo-Indians in the contemporary world. The methodology applied for this paper is mostly qualitative in nature, and the data are collected through secondary sources such as books, journals, articles, websites, magazines, and other published literature related to the subject matter. The definition of the term Anglo-Indians was legalized by the Government of India Act of 1935. Article 366(2) of the Indian Constitution defines the Anglo-Indians as a person whose father or any of whose other male progenitors in the male line is or was of European descent, but who is domiciled within the territory of India and is or was born within such territory of parents habitually resident therein and are not established there for temporary purposes only. Though the term of Anglo is symbolic to that of British affiliation, in the general Indian context, the term Anglo is defined in the greater context of European descent and British in particular under the British colonial rule. Origin and the transition of the Anglo-Indian prior to to India's independence period. Along with the other European merchants, the British traders came to India in the early 17th century when Queen Elizabeth II granted a charter to a company of English merchants came to be known as the British East India Company, giving them exclusive rights to trade with the East. During this period, intermarriages or union between the native Indian women and the European in general, or the British in particular, males were encouraged with the hope that such relationship would create a bond of loyalty with native Indians and strengthen the European power as well. Dr. Gloria Moore, in her work on the Anglo-Indians, notes that the East India Company directors in the 17th century paid one pagoda or gold mohur for each child born to an Indian mother and a European father as family allowance. Children with British or European fathers and Indian mothers were called country born and included those with Portuguese, Dutch, and French fathers. These offsprings were amalgamated into the Anglo-Indian community, forming a bulwark for the British Raj, a buffer but also a bridge between the rulers and the subjects. The Anglo-Indians were granted privileges of job opportunities, access to education, and improved life quality under this affiliation, especially who married or were born to the elite households. However, the transition in attitudes of the European towards the Anglo-Indians changed around the mid-18th century when they began to feel threatened with the increasing number of Anglo-Indians whose population were soon taking over the European at that time. By the end of the 18th century, racial ideology of the Europeans also changed, especially the British, towards the Anglo-Indians. The opening of the Suez Canal in the 19th century also brought further changes in the realm of the changing racial ideology of the Europeans. The Suez Canal shortened the distance of travel to India, hence opening travel opportunities to many European women and spouses to travel to India and join their male counterpart. With the increasing arrival of European women, intermarriages between European, British male and Indian women decreased due to the more preference given to the marrying within their own European or British community to maintain their racial purity. The shift of this outlook not only led them to lose their status and position in the colonial India, but also created a stereotypical perception against the Anglo-Indians as mixed race. The sense of racial segregation from the concept of British race purity and the alienation from the unyielding, rigid Indian caste system on the other hand. The Anglo-Indians became a minority community placed in a space where they belonged not fully to the European community nor belonged to the Indian community and had to locate and create their own self-identity as the other. They were socially alienated and degraded, struggling economically and in a confused cultural dilemma. In the 1820s, there was a rise of political activity which brought some changes and certain improvement to the Anglo-Indian community. However, it cannot be overlooked that a huge section of the Anglo-Indians were suffering under poverty due to unemployment and poor paid jobs of those merely employed during this period. During the revolt of 1857 and later in the World War I, where Anglo-Indians sided with the British, also resulted in very less improvement in the economy and social aspects. The aftermath of the World War further resulted in huge number of unemployment and underemployment among the Anglo-Indians due to war and by the Indianization reforms under the Montague-Chelmsford reforms or the Government of India Act 1919, Indian Anglos post-independence period. The most crucial stage in locating the identity of the Anglo-Indians came with the end of the British Raj in India in 1947 when India got its independence. The major decision of the Anglo-Indians were whether to stay back in India or immigrate was prominently related to their sense of identity and belonging. Rachel Almeida, in her essay on the Anglo-Indian migration to Great Britain post-independence in 1947, states that for most part, the mass movement, also known as the Exodus to Great Britain, was carefully calculated, well-planned, and systematically undertaken. The justification behind the choice to emigrate was also set on various reasons. Firstly, the westernized and European ways of upbringing make them culturally anxious to fit into the new independent India, whose notion on culture was strictly bound to their own endogamous community. So they felt that they'll fit and integrate better in a more European and British shared community setting. They also believed that they'll have better and more job opportunities and better quality of life in the European countries, especially Britain, which they consider as their original homeland or fatherland. The political tensions and communal division post-independence declaration leading to the partition also caused uncertainty for the Anglo-Indians as a mixed race and a minority community. The migration of the Anglo-Indians post-India's independence is often categorized in three waves. The first wave of the Anglo-Indian immigration was mostly to Great Britain and Australia. The second wave took place in the 1960s, and the road of migration were mostly to Australia and Canada. The third wave of migration took place in 1970s, which often referred as the family reunion wave. England, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand were the main destination of this wave. Many first generations of the Anglo-Indians who migrated during the first and the second wave of migration were most commonly met with discrimination on racial grounds and linguistic accent differences. Job opportunities were limited and many were compelled to take up blue-collar jobs. However, the second generation had an easier integration into the mainstream society due to the multiculturalism acceptance in the late 20th century. In the 21st century, the Anglo-Indians can be considered mostly well-settled, recognized, and integrated in different countries of the world. They have created their own hybrid kind of identity which neither fully belong there or here, but somewhere in between. They have blended the cultures of both European or British and Indian and carry certain qualities of both cultures. A growing representation approach of the Anglo-Indians in the era of globalization and transnationalism can be viewed in the virtual space. Food culture is one of the fundamental representations of the identity as a mixed race today, which can be seen in books, shows, or YouTube blogs. The Anglo-Indians who stayed back in India after India's independence, though they had still retained some of our identity as Anglo-Indians in terms of lifestyle, food habits, and religion, they have also blended well into the rich cultures of the rest of the mainland or mainstream Indian culture. However, in recent years, research scholars have shown a concern on the decreasing population of the Anglo-Indian in India and also the dire living state of some of the Anglo-Indians, especially who falls under the senior citizens. So with that, I'll just conclude my presentation. Hello. Yeah. Sorry, with limited time, I have to brief out everything.
Sorry, I could not hear you, Nike. What did you say?
Okay, sorry, but with limited time, I have to miss out certain important points. But I hope that's okay. But I'm most welcome for feedbacks.
Well, you were very fast. Your presentation just, was very, very fast. I had to literally, put on my earphones to hear what you were saying. Anybody who has a question for Nike? Any observations, any questions? There is one, Radhika. She has raised her hand. Would you like to say something, Radhika? Radhika, can you hear me? Do you want to ask something?
Hello, ma'am. I'm audible, ma'am.
Yes, you're audible.
Ma'am, I'm audible, ma'am.
Yes, you're audible. Would you like to
Because
ask
the network
something?
issue, I couldn't join at the scheduled time, ma'am. Will you please permit?
Sorry?
Ma'am, because
Okay,
of
you're
network
one of the
issue, I couldn't
presenters.
join at the scheduled time, ma'am.
Yes,
So
we will
please
accommodate you.
permit.
Yes, surely
Yes,
we will
yes, ma'am.
accommodate you. Okay. She's one of the presenters. So before
Thank you.
inviting you, let me just
Okay.
thank Nike for her wonderful presentation. Gaurav, would you like to ask something? No. So Nike talked about the survival of the Anglo-Indians, the historical, social background, the changing attitudes of the Europeans, and also how they were racially outcasted, both whatever I could gather from her presentation. She also talked about the nebulous kind of an identity, the cultural dilemma that these Anglo Indians have to face, and how they have kind of tried to resolve these tensions and uncertainties by either assimilating or by creating a unique identity for themselves. So this is what I could gather from her presentation. Thank you, Nike. So there's no question for you. So I would thank you for your presentation, and I would invite Radhika. She was one of the presenters, but she could not join earlier. So I would invite Radhika, and she is presenting a paper on Sarah Pataski's Deadlock, a feminist study. So over to Radhika. You will get 10 minutes to wind up your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Good. I'm audible, ma'am.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, one and all. I'm Radhika Ingali from Karnataka University, Dharwad. My paper titled has Sarah Paratsky's Deadlock, a feminist study. In some genres of fiction appeal more to one gender than the other, like romance novel. For example, tend to be written and read more often by women, while westerns more typically attract male authors and readers. Crime fiction, by contrast, has flourished in both male and female hands and appeals to both genders. When detective fiction took root in the 19th century with female crime writers and sleuths challenged general expectations about both men's writing and women's characters. The standard critical inclination has been to see writers and detectives has also subverted, especially a male norms for crime fiction. The most significant crime contributions to the American development of fictional female detection in the 19th century is the work of Anna Catherine Green. Her best-selling The Leavenworth Case, published in 1878, featuring New York police detective Ebenezer Grace, is one of the earliest detective novels by a woman. The next major impulse in feminist detection came with the development of American female hard-boiled investigator Clemming. She finds to be the first independent woman. The hard-boiled detective fictions were more influential, however, were Marshall Muller, Sharon McCon, Sarah Paratsky's V.I. Warshawski, and Suvi Grafton's Kinsey Mulhone, who made their mark in the early 1980s. They started revolution by featuring female eye in the scene of detective fiction. They introduced it as a single, intelligent, and in their 30s, these urban private investigators take physical active approach to crime that is far from spinster cosifit. They self-contained and even streetwise they handle guns, face threats and attack from men and kill when they have to. This was influenced by many writers and led us to where we are today. At first, there was a golden age of English women detective fiction between the two world wars with Margia Allingham and patriarchal Wentworth. Dorothy Sayers, of course, Agatha Christie. Then came the golden age of American feminist novel, the 70s with Margia Pease, Marilyn French, Lisa Alder, and many more. Not forgetting Darcia Lessing. Doris Lessing had shown them all the way a decade before. And now in the 80s, the two golden ages seems to have fused into one with the recent and relative proliferations of the feminist crime fiction. This new wave is mostly American and constitutes a remarkable breakthrough in a genre that so far has been largely male dominated. This genre in England is called as detective novel, whereas American fiction is called as a crime or hard-boiled novels, clearly indicating the shift of emphasis in very much the same way as candidates stand for parliament but run for a congress. In the American novel, that least among the best known writers, Chandler, Hammett, or a Ross McConnell, action prevails on brain work. The detective, a private eye, usually runs around as if possessed, fights, kicks, beats, and is beaten up, kills even in a word acts like a man or a woman, and is not afraid to use violence. This is the kind of fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is not only compelling but also provocative. It is a fiction that is rather like a male. Women have no place in that tradition. Neither has heroine or nor has a writer.
I'm
The
sorry to
masculine
interrupt you,
stronghold
Radhika.
has recently been under heavy
Radhika, sorry to interrupt you. You're not very clearly audible.
attack. Women writers, women detectives are beginning to lose their status of additives. Has new at there are Ma'am, I'm audible, ma'am?
Yes, when you say you're audible,
Hello?
you're much clearer. Yes, you're audible.
Oh, okay, ma'am.
Please
Yes,
continue.
yes, ma'am. To start again, the masculine stronghold has recently been under heavy attack. Women writers and women detectives are beginning to lose their status of additives. As a new writers keep emerging on the scene, about 400 have been. Still very few women in these novels who practices the art of detection as a profession. In America, Sarah Paratsky occupied a major place in the history of crime and mystery fictions. With 21 best-selling novels over the past 4 decades, she is a feminist from Chicago, even where her heroine works and lives. To define feminist, the person who supports feminism, which is the belief that women and men should have equal rights of opportunity, whether it may be socially, economically, or politically. So, Deadlock is the second significant crime novel by Sarah Paratsky, told in the first person by Private Eye V.I. Warshawski itself. She is one of the toughest and perhaps the most precisely written of the new breed of female private eyes, making her second appearance in the Deadlock, a fast action adventure involving sabotage and murder in the Great Lakes shipping industry. Sarah Paratsky's Chicago-based investigator illustrate, as she did in Last Case in Indemnity only, how an intelligent and energetic woman can maneuver with ease in her second case. To start with, Vic goes to Chicago port to find out about her cousin Boom Boom's death. She believes that Boom Boom was killed, but police believes that this ex-hockey player died in an accident. So Vic start to digging for motive and evidence. In her second case, in which Wasowski has a crucial figure in a new breed of female detectives in detective literature. It also appears is the basis of a female film V.I. Warshawski too. Boom Boom was Vic's cousin who died by slipping in propeller of a ship. She visits Idiot Grain where Boom Boom was working. She scanned the wharf when Henry Clavin, night watchman, was killed one night. When some people broke into Boom Boom's place, so she quickly realized he could have had a dozen of dangerous documents connected with the shipping industry, and this makes her think he was pushed. They will probably be the same people who killed Mr. Clavin. Definitely someone who wanted Vic out of this case. So they attempt to kill her for more than one time. At first, they took her car brakes and string while she was at a port, so she ended up running into Shedden. The Mack truck had hit her and knocked it into her lane. After the accident, she was asked by Boom Boom, her friend as well as a police inspector, I quote, why can't she stay home and raise a family and just stay hacked out of this kind of mess? Unquote. Even the idea of women toting around revolver is a contrary to all boom boom's nations of proper proper ladies lifestyle. But she refuses to do woman's work. She counts as a woman with him. And second time by blowing up a Lucella, and that's why gives her something a personal interest in exploring short of launching a full-scale investigation into everyone's motives and moments. The whole thing turns on money, lots of money. Clinton Phillips works in Idiot Grain, where Boom Boom's works. He knew he was never going to have enough if he just struggled along his salary. So he decides to skim something off the top before it even hit the Idiot books. The trouble was Vic was going to too many different directions. She needed to find about her car, needed to find about Phillips' money, and she needed to know who broke into Boom Boom's apartment and killed Henry Clevin. When Mr. and Mrs. Phillips moved to Lake Bell 5 years ago, Niels knew Phillips was fielding around with the Idur grain invoices. He promised not to tell him to David Argues, who was chairman of Idur grain. If Phillips would start giving Graphax a performed position on shipping order, in exchange, Graphax helped pave the way for them socially when they moved back to Lake Bell. Got them into the Martium Club and all that good stuff, and then Boom Boom had gotten close to truth on the invoices. Niels Grafak tried to bribe Boom Booms, who didn't. It didn't work. When it didn't work, then he killed him and ended the matter. To conclude, Sarah Paratsky raised her voice by featuring female as a protagonist in all her works. In a time when mystery novels by and about women were rarely earning reviews by top critics. As we know, Sherlock Holmes uses for the first time in a novel, uses a magnifying glass in his first novel, A Study in Scarlet. In the same manner, Sarah Paratsky shows Vic uses the magnifying glass out of her handbag and began to scrutinize the ship. This is how Sarah Paratsky equality of the gender expressed in a novel. So by this we can certainly say that Sarah Paratsky was French feminist. The present novel Deadlock is one such novel by Paratsky which has female detective, and it can be viewed and analyzed from the feministic perspective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Radhika. Radhika talked about Deadlock by Sarah Paratsky, a detective novel, and she highlighted how the female sleuths are uncommon, and this genre of detective fiction has been a male territory, mostly predominantly, and how Sarah has introduced a female sleuth and how she's been successful in
Yes, ma'am.
gaining prominence. My question to you, Radhika, is regarding the gun culture that is there in America. What do you have to say regarding the gun culture and the women entering this genre of detective fiction, which is embroiled in violence? Any observations?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, I want to ask you about the gun culture that exists in America and how these detective fiction, and you're saying that women are entering this genre of writing sleuth detective fiction. Can you elaborate on this point? That isn't it promoting a kind of gun culture, women who were not known for
Yes,
the
ma'am.
violence, and how would you
Yes, this gun culture shows that a woman is. This gun culture, like Shara Paratsky just gave a picture about men views on a woman, that she should stay in a home and she can't do anything that man can do. But Sarah Paratsky shows that woman can do whatever the man can do. She can handle everything, even the household, even outer things where man can do anything, same as woman can do the same thing.
So, following the footsteps of men, or trying to wind with what they have been promoting, would you call this feminism? Is this feminism the definition? Is this the definition of feminism, or would you?
No, ma'am. It's my attempt to define feminism through the Sarah Paratsky. This is how she shows the equality between men and women. How women should be treated equally.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Anybody has a question for Radhika? Any observation or any question from the audience? I guess there is no other question for you, Radhika. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Is there anybody who is left out? I just saw the name of one of the presenters pop up, P. Senthil Kumar. Are you here?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you
Good
like
morning,
to make
ma'am.
Yeah, good afternoon. Would you like to make your presentation, Senthil?
Yes, ma'am. I'm ready, ma'am.
Okay, so you have to be very brief because we are already delayed.
Yes, ma'am.
We have P. Senthil Kumar with us.
Yes,
He
ma'am.
is a
A
PhD scholar
PhD
from
scholar,
Department of English, Government Arts and Science College, Kumarapalayam, Namakkal.
Namak.
Yeah. And he is presenting his paper on social political dynamics in Nayantara Sehgal's A Situation in New Delhi. So over to you, Senthil.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Very good afternoon to all. I am Sendil Kumar from Government Arts College, Kumarapalayam. I am as a PhD scholar. Uh, Nagendra Sahal, a well-known writer in India, everyone knows it. There is the she is the daughter of Vijayalakshmi Pandit. Vijayalakshmi Pandit is the uh, sister of Jawaharlal Nehru. Jawaharlal Nehru is the former Prime Minister of India. Uh, Nagendra Sahgal is wrote this novel about the tribute of Jawaharlal Nehru on the situation in New Delhi. The situation in New Delhi means it is the after 1960s, in the end of the Jawaharlal Nehru's life. At the time, they Indira Gandhi and worked in the university so that, ma'am, is it audible?
Yes, you are very much audible, but I would request you to speed up your presentation a bit.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. Then see Nagendra Sahgal and then uh, written this novel based on the Jawaharlal Nehru's whole life. When the Jawaharlal Nehru is supporting for the democracy, Jawaharlal Nehru is supporting for the non-violence. And then here the Jawaharlal Nehru is a name is this novel is name is Sivaraj, and Devi is represented as a Indira Gandhi in the situation in the in New Delhi. Are these novels and then what is the importance of education, politics, democracy, historical events when the Sivaraj was implemented of the historical novels, the glimpses of the world, the famous work of the Jawaharlal Nehru. He wrote this that novel, and then that novel also is the world history was written by the Jawaharlal Nehru. That means the Sivaraj, and then giving the power to the supporting to the people. He learned many the politics, many politics. The Devi is learning from the Sivaraj. The Sivaraj is giving more and more power guidance to the Devi, and the Devi learn many ideas. This is the happen, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Senthil. Senthil's paper was kind of very brief. I hope I did not deter you from completing your presentation. That was certainly not my intention.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Mr. Senthil, he talked about the social political dynamics in Nayantara Sehgal's situation in New Delhi. And this novel basically is an account of the political scenario after the end of the Nehruvian era. And I wish we could have heard more about your presentations because I could not gather much about what you're trying to say through this paper. Thank you very much, Senthil.
Thank
So
you,
I
ma'am.
guess that is the end of this technical session. Any questions, queries for the paper presenters? One last call for anybody to ask any question. So we had these 5 presenters and who presented different papers on varied topics, and it was a very enriching experience. I certainly appreciate Dr. N.R. Gopal's presentation, and special mention to Gaurav Sen Gupta. I was very impressed with their presentations. Gaurav Sen Gupta has chosen a very interesting topic, very relevant, pertinent topic. The medical humanities. It's something which has never
Yes.
been touched upon, and it's a very universal kind of topic which is relevant for all. And his presentation was very well done. I congratulate you, Gaurav. And of
Thank you.
course,
Thank you so much.
N.R. sir is, of course, a very learned scholar. I mean, he needs no formal introductions or appreciations. We have so much to learn from N.R. sir. His presentation has encouraged us to read a little bit more about native literature, and of course he has opened up a very novel research area of comparative cross-cultural study of Native Americans and our own culture here in India, which has been relegated in the background because of the the colonial onslaught and other effects. So all the presenters presented the papers very well. Thank you so much for a patient hearing, and thank you all for being here. I thank the organizers for having me here as a chairperson for this session. It was indeed a very enriching experience. I look forward to more such sessions with other participants as well. I would also like to thank Dr. Abhyudita for suggesting my name as one of the chairpersons. And I thank the organizers once again for having me here. Thank you all. Have a good day. Thank you so much.